Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you everybody for joining us this Saturday morning. Today we are going to be hearing from Joanne Cattell. She's going to be sharing about the Amanda Trail and the history, significance, and bridging gaps. Our next presentation will be next Saturday, February 6th, and we will be learning about satellite telemetry, behavior, and ecology of pinnipeds on the Oregon coast. And a little bit about the collaborative. My name is Tara DuBois, and I'm the communications coordinator for the Cape Perpetual Collaborative. And our vision is to foster conservation and collaboration with local communities for scientific exchange, management, awareness, and stewardship from the land to the sea in and around Cape Perpetual Marine Reserve. And our three guiding principles are community engagement, leveraging resources, and engaging in partnerships. And as you can see at the bottom here, our founding partners include a variety of federal agencies, state agencies, some local nonprofits, and the Confederated Tribes of Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians. And the collaborative's focus is around the Cape Perpetual Marine Reserve, which is the largest of 5 marine reserves in Oregon. And combined with the marine protected areas to the north and south, there's some form of protected waters that stretch between Yachats and Florence. And fun fact for today, we have put together a resource activities guide for visitors. This is just one page of 3, but it includes beach access, viewpoints, tide pool areas, hiking recommendations, tide pool etiquette, that type of stuff, and is hyperlinked, so it will take you directly to where you want to go. And you can find this on our website at capeperpetualcollaborative.org and hit the Visitor Resources tab. And we also host a variety of community science projects. Some of them are seasonal and some of them are every month. And we also are hosting another speaker series called the Young Scientist Webinar Series. This is on the second Tuesday of evening, October through April. Our next one is going to be Tuesday, February 9th. And you can find all these information and activities and events on our website, on our events calendar. Just click on the events tab and it will highlight and show you all of the different events, and you can go ahead and get more information and get registered there. And I always encourage you to connect with us on our Facebook page, as well as our YouTube channel, where we will house recordings of this presentation, as well as ones we've had in the past. And with that, I'm going to introduce our speaker, Joanne Kittel. She is a View the Future co-chair, member and trails development leader of Yachats Trails Committee, volunteer and trainer at My Sister's Place, member and vice chair of Angel Job Corps, Community Relations Committee, member of Secure Resources Advisory Committee of Siuslaw National Forest. So many titles. Joanne, she's recognized for her deep personal commitment to preservation and protection of the natural environment, promotion of education and related to trails and conservation, and researching and sharing the historical truths of First Nation people who lived in the Central Coast of Oregon coast region. Professionally, Joanne is a psychotherapist who specialized in treating victims of trauma and perpetrators of trauma. Her work includes those affected by historical drama. And with that, Joanne, I just want to say it's such a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And you can take it over from here if you'd like. And again, for those, while Joanne's pulling up her screen, just want to remind everybody it is being recorded, so we will have this available later. And if you have questions throughout Joanne's presentation, feel free to add them in the Q&A section, and we will answer all of those questions at the end of the presentation. Enjoy.
Thank you, Tara. I'm very, very pleased to be here today and to be invited by the Cape Perpetual Collaborative and the Siuslaw National Forest. So I want to start off by saying that when I've done this talk in person, either by myself or with Doc Slider, who's now chief of the Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw tribe, we usually start off with having the Yachats Community drum present, inviting participants to drum before the start of the talk. one of the things that I or Doc would ask the audience is, what are the 7 directions? And the audience usually came up with 6 directions, but rarely with the 7th direction. You know, north, south, east, west, the sky, and the earth. But I want you to also be aware of the 7th direction. And that 7th direction is the beating of our own hearts that the drum symbolizes. And the heart is the place where the truth is told. The heart is the place where we accurately listen. So I will be speaking from my heart today, and I'd like you to listen from your heart. We'll be covering today, in the brief period of time we have, the truth about the Alcy subagency that was once located in what is now Yachats, the Amanda story, and how tragedy was revealed in the Yachats community. And I want to define what historical trauma is, the damage it does to communities, and the process of healing through the necessary first step of being able to reveal the truth, and that process of transcendence that comes after. And the importance of names, testimonials, events. One example I'll give is New Year's Day's peace hike that creates understanding and appreciation of historical truths. And the last is that valuing these historical truths has helped in the last years to reconcile a previously divided people. I put up the a photo of the Yachats area. This is taken from the Yachats State Park looking south at Cape Perpetua. And if you look at the Cape in the distance, since we'll be talking about the Amanda Trail, it starts at the top where the Whispering Spruce Trail is, and it proceeds east off the site of this photo, proceeds down an interceding headland that you don't see in this photo. It goes around the headland that's in front of the Cape, near the bottom of that property above Highway 101, and crosses the highway at the south Yachats city limits, and proceeds on the west side to Yachats Ocean Road inside the city limits. It's about a 3.5 mile long trail. I wanted to also show you 2 maps. The map to the left shows all the different coastal and valley nations that once existed prior to the reservation years and the taking over of these lands by Euro-Americans. You can see large swaths of the nation lands, but if you look at the different names, there's a minimum of 25 different tribes or bands. Each one had their own separate languages, and within those languages, there were different dialects. They were very self-sustaining, rich cultures that existed for many, 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 many thousands of years. Archaeological site investigations show in the Yachats area, there was a minimum of over 6,000 years of continuous occupation. There was some site sampling that was done that was 8,000 years old, and longer than that, well, you know, the ocean was further out to the west, and so older archaeological sites may be on the ocean floor. But in the early 1800s, Euro-American diseases invaded North America, and certainly the coast was no exception. Estimates are between 80 and 90% of these people died as a result of smallpox, measles, influenza, and other Euro-American diseases. So that when trappers came and in their diaries or journals talked about the coastal Indians, they were not seeing the full and enriched cultures. They were seeing and observing and writing about the survivors that survived these catastrophic diseases. Well, homesteading wanted to move in. People want to homestead and like the rest of the country, and force the Indians into some type of containment. There certainly the people, Indians that would survive, fought that, and they lost. They finally accumulated and capitulated to agree to sign treaties between 1853 and 1855 to move to a 1.1 million acre reservation. And you see that on the right-hand side map on the Central Oregon coast. They were led to believe that they would be peacefully brought there. They were led to believe that they would get all the goods and services and materials they needed to restart their lives again. And they really had access to that whole 1.1 million acres. The only tribes that were not interrupted at the time were the Siuslaw Indians, who are around the Florence area, and the Alcy Indians that were around the Walport area. Those that were in Yachats no longer existed. Most of them died from the Euro-American diseases, or they, who survived, joined their cousins up in Walport. But unbeknownst to the tribes who signed these treaties, they were then forcibly shipped and marched up the coast, down to Columbia, down the Willamette, and were relegated to two prison camps. One was Siletz and one was Grand Ronde. The Kuzlur-Umpqua people were relegated to on a spit near where Fort Umpqua was for several years. They didn't know where to put them. And further investigation said, well, there's this area that is a no person's land, and we can forcibly march them up there, which they did in 1860, and they called the area the Alcy Subagency. The Alcy Subagency basically imprisoned the Coos and Lower Umpqua people. They eventually also imprisoned the Alcy Indians, because in 1865, the federal government cut that 1.1 million acre reservation in half, from the Quina River up to where Newport is, down to the Alcy River where Walport now is, and forced the Alcy Indians, mostly who were north of the Alcy River, south, where there was less food and less protection. On the forced marches, the Coos and Lower Umpqua people, at least 50% have been estimated to die, as did others who were forced to go to Siletz and Grand Ronde. When they got to the reservation, they were restricted from hunting for their traditional food sources, because they needed weapons or implements for hunting that the prison agents were afraid might be used against them, which left them with even less food sources, because the treaties were never ratified. So all the goods, services, materials that they were promised weren't forthcoming. They were forced to grow unsustainable crops on the oceanfront in Yachats, and where the Adobe resort is now, and where the Aqua Vista drives are, that's where they were forced to grow the wheat, oats, timothy grass. Of course, they were subject to failure. Farmer agents reports in 1868, he mentioned about trying to have the Indians grow underground potatoes, turnips in a boggy area. Well, that's where the wetlands now is, and that's so acidic, no root vegetables would have survived there. And they couldn't forage very far, because they were, Indians would understandably run away, and they didn't have the supervision to keep them contained. In the first 12 years, as an estimate of 60% of the Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Alcy Indians died at the Alcy Subagency. They died of starvation, malnutrition, disease, exposure, number of them being killed for trying to escape. And as Robert Kenta, the cultural resources manager, and tribal council members said many died of depression of spirits. But as we go along, the situation got so bad and the prison agents kept changing. I mean, there were 7 agents in all in 15 years. And a number of agents lied about the conditions in Yachats, that when an Army sergeant came to be a temporary agent after Agent Collins left, he then revealed the truth that deaths were many, births were few. The Indian women there were being raped by settlers, that there was inadequate housing. People are dying from exposure. And so the next agent was someone by the name of Sam Case, that people in Lincoln County know the name because he was one of the founders of Newport eventually. He had a whole different bent on things. He was much more compassionate and competent. And so he allowed all the Indians to go back to their native hunting and other practices for food sustainability. He had them build a road up the Yachats River where they were able to grow sustainable crops. And within a year, they had changed their lives around. Deaths were very few, births grew, they were able to be self-sustaining. And then his person that took his place, his last name was George Litchfield, continued that same type of mentorship. Well, the Siletz agent, who was their supervisor, and his supervisor found out that Yachats really had good farming land, and they wanted to close down the Alcy sub-agency and open it up for homesteading. Well, in 1875, there was an act of Congress that said there will be no more reduction of reservations that without the express consent of the chiefs and leaders in that reservation. Well, every single chief and leader at the Alcy sub-agency said, we don't want to move again. And we've now reestablished ourselves well. The Siletz agent applied to the Surgeon General and to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and they forcibly closed down the Alcy sub-agency. Number of Kuzan and Lower Umpqua ran away, ran south, and became refugees in their own homeland. Those who did not get away ended up being imprisoned in the Siletz reservation or prison camp. I want to show you this photo. It's really grainy, but it shows the agent's house where the Yachats Cemetery now is. I want you to pay particular attention to the left side of that photo. You'll see a trunk of a tree. That was the whipping post that was used when Indians tried to run away or disobeyed. They would be tied to that tree and whipped in front of their other tribal members and to children. You can vaguely see a tall figure to the right of that. I suspect that that's Agent Collins because in the journal writings I found he was 6'5", 6'6". Now I want to tell you about the Amanda story. It's a true story, and it was found by a academician, historian, researcher by the name of Dr. Stephen Dow Beckham out of Lewis and Clark College. He was at the Smithsonian Institute doing research when he found a diary of a soldier. The soldier's name was Royal Benzel. Benzel was a soldier at the at one of the coastal forts. He Fort Yamhill, I believe, and he and other soldiers would hit the coast, go south, and round up runaway Indians from the prison camps and find other Indians that had not been caught yet. Well, through word of mouth, they found out that there was a woman living up the Umpqua River with her common law husband. And so they boated up there and they found Amanda. She was blind. She had an 8-year-old daughter, Julia. And her common law husband's name was DeQuee. Now, this was not uncommon for them to find a white man with a common law Indian woman considered their wives. The soldiers had the authority to marry these couples, and if the men were willing to marry these women, the women could stay. DeQuee refused to marry Amanda. So in some detail in his diary, Amanda is forcibly removed from her daughter. Her daughter clings to her, begging her to not go. And she is taken away from her, boated back to the beach where other imprisoned Kuzma or Umpqua women, children, some men were found. And they were forced to be barefoot. They were marched up 80 miles north. There was no food. There was no additional clothing for them. Royal Benson mentioned that they would dig holes in the sand and cuddle up there for warmth, using their body heat and protecting the children. They made it less than 10 miles a day. And when they finally got to the Cape, a soldier led Amanda around the Cape. He was on his horse. She was tied to a rope. And at the base of the Cape and with the salt rock, she fell so many times. She left a trail of blood, a trail so significant that it could have been a trail to track her, any Indian, down. We know that Amanda made it to the Yachats Alcy sub-agency. We don't know what happened to Amanda after that, and likely she died. It was part of that 60%. I want to talk about the results of all that, because what I'm describing to you is that genocide happened in Yachats. That's what genocide is. And yes, it happened all over North America, happened all over the Western Hemisphere, but it also happened in what is now Yachats. And genocide has a lasting effect on those individuals and the subsequent generations. But I want you to also understand what makes up trauma. And trauma is both qualitatively and quantitatively different than any grievous or difficult experiences that one has. Time never brings healing. That's a critical factor. One's foundation, one's personality is shattered. The emotional suffering is so deep, it becomes physical and encompasses the whole physical body and beyond. And what one once thought was and felt is no more. Their reality is no more. And not only does that build a lack of trust in others, they don't trust themselves anymore. Their intuition is badly damaged. Shame ensues, and usually with traumatic situations, the shame is brought onto that person. It's not from that person. And the only way they can possibly survive is to grow silent. And this results in all different sorts of mental illnesses, anxiety disorders, depressions, avoidance behaviors, addictions, of course, accident proneness, both chronic and acute illnesses, interpersonal violence, and ultimately, for many people, suicide. It can result also in intergenerational trauma being passed down from one generation to another. And the thing also about trauma is that the person lives and the community lives in the past and the present at the same time. Even if it's not conscious, it's a part of the unconscious, and that's called transposition. So historical trauma is the collective psychological and emotional injury, both over a lifespan and across generations, that has resulted from the cataclysmic history of genocide. So given that, how does people transcend from historical trauma? Well, first and foremost, the shame and the imposed silence has to be broken. And the only way that can happen is through revealing, being aware of, understanding and appreciating the unvarnished truths that have occurred both in the past and collectively to the present. And when it happens to entire communities and cultures, sharing the truths through collective mourning provides a necessary step in discovering and building one's trust in themselves and having a positive regard for their tribal cultural identity again, and a commitment to their health and the health of the entire community. It's collective mourning, and that needs to be repeated. And if the truths in mourning are acknowledged through other communities, then that positive commitment deepens. And this is something I added, that's not from Dr. Braveheart, and this is from my personal and professional experience, that those individuals and communities who work toward what that process is called transcendent are the most courageous, resilient, compassionate, and spiritually grounded. They absolutely know the qualitative meaning of gratitude. So given that, when I first bought the property that my husband and I live on in 1986, I always wanted to know who were the indigenous people that lived here. I did that anywhere I lived in the country. I never had any trouble anywhere else I lived, but when I came to Yachats and I was visiting before we moved here, I was surprised that I was not getting hardly any information who were the indigenous people that called this area their home for thousands of years. And also I came across the sign at the Yachats Cemetery. It's an interpretive sign that talked about the Alcy sub-agency being an idyllic community that existed for 15 years. And the Indians that lived here decided to go back to this agency where they could be with their relatives, be closer to their relatives. But then I went to the library in Yachats and I found a book by Stephen Dowell Beckham called the Indians of Western Oregon, This Land Was Theirs. And chapter 10 is the reservation years. Dr. Beckham described the Alcy sub-agency as a location of atrocities. And it was in that chapter that I learned the Amanda story. I made a commitment to myself as a trauma therapist that I was going to find out the truth when I moved here. And that's what I did. I was joined by another new resident, Suzanne Curtis, who had the same questions. Neither one of us were academicians, historians, or researchers. And so we continued our quest to try to find out the historical truth about the indigenous people here and about what really happened at Alcy sub-agency. So we eventually went to Oregon Historical Society in Portland, and we really started uncovering some information. But I also reached out to the Confederate Tribes of Siletz and the Confederate Tribe of the Coos, Loronco, and Siuslaw Indians. And I did hear from Robert Kenta, and who's in the corner photo. And he was enormously helpful. This was in 1995. And he not only gave us just a ton of information, particularly about the Alcy sub-agency, but also allowed us into the tribal archives. Then he referred me to Phyllis Steeves, the upper photo, who is then the archaeologist for the Siuslaw National Forest and the tribal liaison. She generously loaned us and very confidentially archaeological site investigations in the immediate Yachats area that had been done that showed the continuous occupation of people for over 6,000 years in the Yachats area, and perhaps much longer than that. And she had the patience to teach Suzanne and I how to read an archaeological site investigation report as well. We also heard from Don Warat. He was the first historian of the Coos, Loronco, and Siuslaw tribe, the middle photo to the left. And we were invited and spent several different trips to his archives. The culmination of all that information, both about the indigenous people of the Yachats area and the prison camp years, became so important that Suzanne and I decided that we really need to put this in a much more professional article to share with the community. And those three individuals came through for us to be our supervisors, and they supervised every single word that we wrote in that article that anyone now can obtain. And that's the article. It's like a booklet, and it was revised in 2010. And it really was a wake-up call for the community of Yachats. And I also put a photo of Deleuze Jackson. He was chief of the Coos people and was imprisoned at the Alcy sub-agency. My daughter was one of the many informants that researchers got a great deal of information about the Alcy sub-agency in Yachats. And he had a Dream Power song, and in it, it said, "We're not going to fall down." And it's a song that's been sung by the Coos, Uncas, Sayusla, and other Indians of different cultures ever since that period of time. And if people have attended the peace hike in the past, it's a song that's sung at that time too. Well, at the same time, Suzanne and I were working on the article. My husband and I, his name was Norman, wanted to build an Oregon Coast Trail property, and we were going to donate it. And my God, were we naive. We just thought, well, we're going to donate it, everyone will be happy, it'll be built in a year. It was more complicated than that. Actually, the idea for a trail down the north face of the Cape was not my idea at all. It was conceived in 1984, and the proposed trail was going to be called Amanda. And when I started researching it in 1988, I wanted to know if that was after the story. And no one seemed to know, and no one seemed to know who named it. Well, 15 years later, I met the wonderful gentleman who did propose that trail, who developed lots of the trails at the Cape, Lloyd Collette, and yes, he confirmed it was named after the Amanda story. So that was our condition, that having the trail built through our property would have to be named Amanda. And State Parks was our contact for and would get receive the donation and would build a trail across our property, and Federal Forest Service and Angel Job Corps would build it on the federal side. Well, there lots of different barriers had to be problem solved. And in 10 years, we actually got it built down Cape Perpetua and through our property, but we couldn't get it connected to town. ODOT had different requirements, and they were very comfortable with that trail being built. But we persisted, and it took 12 years, but with the help of the city of Yachats, the trail was finished in 2009. And look to your right, how many governmental agencies and groups were involved. When you look at this list, the number of people actually involved in that 25 years probably exceeded 150. But we got it done, and 2009 was our final dedication. We'll talk about that in a minute. But you know, when the trail was first built, not a lot of people were using it. And for the first 6 years, I did about 90% of the maintenance work, both on the federal side and the half a mile across our property. I met a few people who would help me once in a while, and that was wonderful, but there wasn't much interest in the trail. And then 2003, a resident of Yachats, George Kopich, approached me because he was gifted a statue, and he had called it Amanda. And he and the artist, Cy Meadow, both felt strongly that the statue belonged to the trail. The very next day, we erected the statue right by the Amanda Creek. And by some miracle, it brought hikers just by word of mouth. And the gathering area naturally developed. And Amanda was brought gifts. And I would hear music being played down there, and prayers were given, and different events, informal events happened down there. I came to learn that people laid their loved ones' ashes down there. But very importantly, her story being told. And with that, this trail started becoming crowded, and which really led to, and was the impetus to get the trail finished and have ODOT and us work together to get it completed. And so on the completion of the trail, the city of Yachats valued the Amanda Trail and the other trails, and saw that, you know, by that time, a few friends were trying to take care of it on the state park side. The Federal Forest Service, thanks to a woman by the name of Sharon, a steward, were starting to take care of the federal side. They said, I think we're going to have a formal trails committee under auspices of the Parks and Commons Commission. And so one was started, and we got a small budget. And you can see that we have a good group of volunteers. If you look at the photo to the right, you see Tara in the middle of the front row. And of course, the average age is about 60, well, maybe 70 something years old, but we've become a good crew, and we've been active for 11 years now. But more happened. I mean, I and a friend put up a box with the Amanda story in it and the quotes from the Benzel's diary. It was meant to be temporary, but I wanted to make sure when people traverse the trail, they learn the story. But then we decided to do interpretive signs, both on the Amanda story and the Yachats trail, which is, I call it the sister trail to Amanda, Yachats being the only known name of the southern Alcy village in Yachats that we could find. And under supervision of Robert Kenta and also Jesse Beers of the Kuzlar Onkwan Sayusa tribe, we developed these 7 interpretive signs. And 4 on the Amanda trail, 3 on the Yachats trail. And that also brought more interest. And additionally, tribal blues, the tribe, and now Chief Slider is a magnificent flutist, and he composed music. And one of them that he composed is called Amanda, and it's the only one he's ever put words to. And he recorded a CD called Amanda. Numerous articles were written. So 2 of them went international. Sierra Club had one that went international, describing the Trail of Tears and the Amanda Trail and its story. Videos have been also done. OPB has done a special on this trail. And then a play was written about the story. The play's been shown a number of times in Eugene and several times at Willamette University, bringing more people to come to the trail. We have a trail counter right now on the Amanda Trail, and as of last year, over 10,000 people recorded. Well, Laura-Lee Svengard was our first trails chair, and she and I and many other Yahatians were present at the 2009 dedication of finalizing the Amanda Trail. And about 35 tribal members came. Many of them I didn't know. And it ended up being a very emotional tribute. But the dedication itself was at the north end of the new trailhead, and they wanted to see the Amanda statue. So we all went to the location of the Amanda statue along the Amanda Creek. And I bared witness to a very emotional process that occurred. Tears were flowing, and Doc Slider played Amazing Grace. I bared witness to what transcendence can really be, and when one community acknowledges to another culture the historical truth. Well, Laura-Lee was there too, and she was deeply moved by the tribute, and she conceived this idea of having the New Year's Day peace hike. So we started off very small, And it was, her idea was to commemorate the tragic experience of Amanda and what her tragic experience symbolized, and for everyone who participated to make a solemn commitment to find that place of peace in their heart and to carry that power and help direct their actions for the new year. And so it was constructed so people would hike from the Yachats Commons, where the ceremony would start, and then finish at the Amanda statue, Amanda Bridge, and along the Amanda Creek. And it came that, tribal members would conduct the ceremony. Well, you can see how it grew and grew and grew and grew. And very active and positive participation by people who came from everywhere. And for those who couldn't do the hike, we had a ceremony at the Little Log Church as well. And we always dealt with any type of unpredictable situation, particularly the weather. Well, again, we always were doing projects on the Amanda Trail, always keeping the story in mind. And there was the first bridge built in 1997 that was meant to only last a few years. It was temporary. It lasted 13 years and was getting very dangerous. So View the Future, local nonprofit that has a trails component to it, and state parks decided to build a new bridge. And we wrote a grant and built a fiberglass bridge, continuous span, that was 65 feet long. And we had a wonderful dedication between our culture and tribes. And unfortunately, the bridge only was there for 4 years, 3 months, and a devastating mudslide caused by a clear cut took out the whole area. In fact, I took the picture photo on the left, and I'm standing in the same spot on the right-hand side. It just was between 35 and 45 million tons came down onto my property, only stopped by Highway 101. And it came down between 25 and 30 miles an hour. It wiped out the Amanda statue. It wiped out 400 trees. It filled in the grotto by 8 feet. And of course, the bridge was in tatters on a 12-foot debris pile. And we had to close down the trail. But let me also tell you about miracles. Laura Lee had less than 2 weeks to reorganize the peace hike. We couldn't have it obviously to this location. The trail was closed down. So she rerouted to the hike trail on the opposite end of town. But on New Year's Day of 2016, between 11:30 and 12:30, the very time that 100 or more people would be gathered on my driveway just before going down to the Amanda Grotto to have the ceremony, 4 large middle growth hemlock trees came down right on that spot across my driveway. If we would have had the Amanda peace hike in the same location, I don't know how many people would have gotten injured or worse yet, died. So I have to believe that Amanda did something about that she sacrificed her symbol, the bridge, the trees, and the area in order to save our lives. Well, it wasn't safe to go in there. The potential more slides could have happened, but by late April, early May, people just came. I mean, Southwest National Forest, state parks, Angel Job Corps, and tribal people, Yachats Trails Committee, and more just came saying, we're going to reopen the trail. And the Yachats Trails Committee opened up a new gathering area. The trees that fell across my driveway, a Job Corps was kind enough to cut up and haul down for new benches and seating. And I knew that there were actually 3 Amanda statues that were created in 1999. And I knew who had the other two. So I called the couple and I asked if they would sell one of the statues. And they said, nope, we won't sell them. We're going to donate whichever statue you want. So in May, we picked up the one statue, and Robert Kenta helped us install the new statue in the gathering area. And Robert said something that was very poignant and truthful. He said, it's wonderful that Amanda is now facing her homeland. And soon after, so the Doc Slider and his son, Scott, come and to greet the new Amanda. Over 78 people worked in a period of about 5 weeks, many of them multiple times, to get the trail open by Memorial Day weekend of 2016. Well, okay, it's a temporary bridge. And I didn't mind just keeping a temporary bridge. I mean, the slides are going to happen. There's a history of slides there from clear cuts. If the next bridge was wiped out, it would be a simple fix and a cheap fix to replace it. But state parks had bigger ideas, and the conclusion was to build a suspension bridge, something high enough that when another mudslide would happen, the bridge would be above it. And so FEMA agreed to not replace the same kind. They understood that we needed something that was more enduring. And also View the Future, the local nonprofit, came on board and went to collect funds so we could pay for, raise enough funds to pay for 1/4 to 1/3 of the cost of all of this. And so with design, planning, soil testing being done, was built in 2019, 2020. Different delays occurred, and despite View the Future raising $70,000, thank you for Petra Foundation, Discover Your Northwest, Sayusa National Forest, Let's Tribal Charitable Contribution Fund, and thank you to Three Rivers Foundation. Everyone contributed, including both tribes, through their foundations, and we had over 50 financial contributors. And so we were ready to build it. And then COVID happened. And I got some sad news in early June that because of the massive layouts, Dennis Comfort, the coast manager, who loved the Amanda Trail as much as I do, said it had to be tabled indefinitely. So I got ready to, and was returning grant money and possibly big donor money to people. And 5 weeks later, the director of state parks changed her mind. She just said, this is one project that's too important to table. And somehow, some way, we're going to get this bridge built. And so it was back on the books again. And October 1st, 2021, construction will start on the Amanda Suspension Bridge. And why October 1st? Well, because we have to wait till marble murrelet nesting season is safely over with. Well, the Amanda Trail has become a solemn and spiritual trail for many. It's along with its sister trail, the Kite Trail. But Jesse Beers has often said in the last years that it's also become a healing trail. It's been built on the foundation of the truth. And as a result, it's developed trust between cultures. And one of the things I've learned over the years, no mudslide, no pandemic, no tsunami, no earthquake, nothing is going to destroy these trails and their story. They'll endure over time and bring joy and grace to all who walk their path. And if knowing that there's a lot of questions, and knowing that you'd like more information, viewthefuture.org has a link called View the Past. There's articles about the Kite Trail, the Amanda Trail. The article that Suzanne and I co-wrote under tribal supervision is there. And also those articles are also under yachatstrails.org. So feel free to read more about what I discussed today. So I'm ready for questions right now, if anyone has questions.
Thank you so much, Joanne. Really appreciate you sharing all of that. I also added the links to the View the Future, View the Past page and yachatstrails.org in the chat, so folks can just copy and paste if you'd like. And if you have any questions, feel free to add them into the chat or into the Q&A box. And nothing at this time, but I would like to add. Okay, here's something popped up. Thank you so much for the presentation. It was jaw-dropping, and I'll never forget what happened to the first people here on the coast. Lots of thanks. That was great. Really appreciate you guys coming. And so you had mentioned that you had done this everywhere that you learned. And when you came to Yachats, it was really hard to find information. And I just want to say thank you for being persistent. You have an amazing knack, obviously, for bringing groups together to get stuff done. And I think that you're a big part of that transcendence in this community, in this area, coming about. And all your work with the tribes is just really powerful. And I really appreciate you doing all of that and bringing that to the forefront of the community.
The truth is a very powerful tool.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that a lot of people really don't understand how powerful that tool is. And it can really lead to forming trust and toward healing, whether it's about individual relationships or between communities and cultures. It's a powerful tool that psychotherapists know to use. And I think that's what brought a lot of people together, because the thing I really emphasize is the partnerships are not just governmental agencies or organizations, they're individuals within it. And that really, the connections with the individuals among these agencies, and when that connections happens, any barriers can be problem solved. You know, because
yeah, totally.
Yeah, and so that's what I found. So I'm speaking of being grateful, I'm extremely grateful. I'm extremely grateful for you and what the cooperative has done, working closely all these years with Iceland National Forest staff, with state parks, working with my group with View the Future, Trails, City of Yachats. We have some remarkably wonderful people. And when we come together, boy, there's nothing that can't be done.
It's awesome that way. All right, so we've had questions rolling in, and I'm just going to kind of start rolling through them. Have they changed the sign at the cemetery about the Alcy camp?
I'm so glad I forgot that part. So thank you for bringing that up. Yes, in fact, that's a lovely story, because community members started approaching me saying, why don't you do something about that sign, Joanne? And so I approached, the sign was placed there in the 70s by the Lincoln County Historical Society. So I made an appointment there and talked to Jody Weaver, the archivist, and also Diane Dissy, the educator, and brought my new revision of the Amanda article that Diane was so helpful helping to edit. And they had received grant applications to change out a lot of signs. And so, much to their credit, former cultural director of the Confederated Tribes of Kuzlar Indians, David Petrie, and I rewrote it. And it was erected the first week of August 2010. It was replaced with a new sign. And another thing is that Yachats has 11 interpretive signs in and around Yachats about our First Nation history. I like to see Portland have 11 interpretive signs about their First Nation history. So.
And considering they size, they need exponentially more. Is it possible to purchase a copy of your book, The Yachats Indians?
Okay, yes, it is, and it sells at cost. A hardbound copy sells at cost at the little bookstore in Yachats. You just need to ask for it. You also can get it online as well at the View the Future, View the Past, or yachatstrails.org. And I believe it's also on the city website and the Chamber of Commerce website. But the hard copies are sold at cost. No one makes a profit at the little bookstore in Yachats.
Very nice. Okay, I think this is a question and I hope I get it right. Could you please explain again how the Siuslaw area natives were not in the forced moves?
Yeah, lucky for them. I just think that from what I read and what I was told, they were a part of that 1.1 million acre reservation to begin with, like the Alcy were. And they just didn't homestead it soon enough. And they didn't have the personnel, the prison agents, to supervise them. And so they just sort of left them alone. They were the luckiest of all the coastal Indians but once homesteading spread, their people were forced out too.
Okay. So there have been a rumor for years that the statue was taken from the site and had to be replaced. Is this true, or is it believed to be under the mudslide?
Well, I think the statue was never taken out. It was replaced with another statue that Cy Meadow made at the same time after the slide. Then the first Amanda statue was obliterated. It didn't have rebar. And you have to understand that, 35 to 45 million tons coming down at 20 to 30 miles an hour. Nothing. I mean, trees were just broken, huge trees were broken in half. There was no sign ever of the Amanda statue again. I don't think it was even buried. I think it was in pieces from the force of the slide. Yeah, so it was never taken, it was never stolen, but we have had Amanda's jewelry stolen more than several times, and that was very sad that people would do something like that. All of her gifts and mementos. I mean, some of them were very personal mementos, and those really break my heart that they would take a little memorial rock of a child's name because his ashes were distributed around the Amanda statue.
And then question here, can the trail be hiked now?
Yes, well, this very minute you can try. It's raining. I mean, yet one thing that I hope people just are aware of, that when you have the high winds and the rain, walking in the forest, it's always a little bit dangerous. But the trails crew, we keep up the trail. As soon as the storm's over, I'll be checking the trail. Hopefully, if it's not raining too hard on February 6th, we will be having another trail crew day. We've had a lot of interruptions based on safety considerations with COVID. But yes, you can walk the trail anytime during daylight hours. And there's certain access points. It's not always easy to reach, but you can, even at the bottom of my driveway outside my gate, one can park as long as they keep the, clear of the gate.
And it's a fantastic trail to hike.
Yeah.
So it looks, I don't see any more questions, but we have several bits of gratitude that I kind of want to run through for you real quick. To end the presentation. Thank you for all of the work in creating the trail. I've been on the hike several times. Loved it. Thank you. The talk was so amazing and thorough. I don't have any questions. You're the best, Joanne. Big thanks. Thank you for both the information and the inspiration. Appreciation for all the time and energy of you and everyone involved to share the past and its stories with us so we can all remember. Authentic relationships are the cornerstone of all these successful partnerships, and Joanne is amazing at that. I hiked the trail in 2015. Thank you for such an informative presentation. Thank you so much for the presentations, everyone's hard work on bringing truth to the forefront. I love Yachats. Wonderful and moving talk. Fascinating. Thank you so much. Excellent presentation, Joanne. Thank you for all of your work uncovering the truth. I especially appreciated the information regarding healing trauma and sharing the truth of history. Fantastic and emotionally fulfilling presentation. Thanks, Joanne. Excellent presentation. I appreciate the focus on the repercussions of trauma and recovery through transcendence. Germans were also able to heal from the horror of Nazi Germany by acknowledging their part in World War II and the awful racism that occurred. So it really is amazing at, like you said, how bringing the truth forward, it has big impact. And just thank you so much again. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Really appreciate you having here and sharing this with everybody. Thank you for everybody attending this morning.
Yes.
Do check out those links that Joanne shared. There are really great articles that you can read, even more details. And I hope you, if you haven't already, come and enjoy that hike. It's absolutely beautiful. And not only just that portion, but it links to so much other, so many other trails in the area. And it's just a great experience.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Tara.
everybody, again. Yeah, thank you, Joanne. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.